Good afternoon, everyone. Merci pour l'invitation de vous rejoindre et de partager quelques pensées cet après-midi. Always a pleasure to be part of the CFA events. I should note that I am acutely mindful that I am standing between you all in happy hour, and will do my best to be brief, but certainly happy to have a bit of Q&A. I guess one of the key messages I wanted to deliver today was just a big thanks to CFA. You're always a great partner with us, and I hope to highlight a few examples of that today. I also, at the outset, wanted to congratulate Todd Lewis on his appointment to the Senate. I would say, reflecting on my years of experience in the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, that the agriculture sector is really fortunate to benefit from a parliamentary community of people who are deeply knowledgeable about the sector, deeply passionate about it. And I know several people from that community are here today, but I know they can always use someone else. So congratulations to Todd. In terms of our partnership with CFA, it's multifaceted, and I'll just touch on a few elements of it here today. But it includes things like sustainability. The Producer Mental Wellbeing Initiative, enhancing Canada's farm financial benchmarking capacity, and harnessing the power of data. Also, although we just heard from a great panel on Canada-US, I did want to touch on that a little bit from our perspective. Maybe talk as well about some of our work on BRM, as well as biosecurity and disease management. Perhaps the most obvious thing I'll say today is that for the past several weeks and months that Canada-US trade and some of the related uncertainties have been our overwhelming #1 priority. It factors into our work interdepartmentally, our work internally, and looms large in almost every stakeholder conversation we have these days. Relationship is, of course, vital on both sides of the border. We export about $60 billion a year worth of agri-food product to the U.S. There's about $200 million a day of product going across the border. And as most or all of you will be aware, our trade is integrated, complementary, and beneficial on both sides of the border. We are, of course, taking the various threats of tariffs very seriously and preparing for a response in whatever eventuality we may face. We know that tariffs will harm consumers, workers, businesses, and the economy across North America. And we are taking every opportunity in Washington and across the U.S. to impress those points on U.S. decision makers. And by we, I mean not just the federal ministers and representatives, but we know provinces and territories have been very active, engaging with their U.S. counterparts. We know, too, that there is no more effective advocate for a case in the United States than Americans themselves, impressing upon their congressional representatives and people in the administration how this is detrimental to their interests. And that's why we really appreciate the outreach that so many in the agri-food sector have done to their counterpart organizations in the United States, to their customers, to their suppliers, to raise awareness about the risks of the threatened tariff agenda. We know that agriculture is an important rural America and agriculture important constituencies in Mr. Trump's coalition. And although we haven't seen agricultural stakeholders perhaps be as vocal on a tariff agenda as we had in President Trump's first term, we know that they're hearing messages from the agricultural community in the U.S. through other channels. Our #1 priority is and will remain a full exemption from tariffs. If tariffs are imposed, we'll be looking at ways to support industries and workers that are impacted. We're giving thought to that and in active dialogue with the CFA as to what some possibilities, both immediate term and longer term, might be in an agricultural context. If tariffs are imposed, we certainly will respond with strength while doing everything we can to minimize impacts on Canadian businesses and consumers. We'll continue to promote and defend Canada's agricultural interests in the United States and look for any measures that could disrupt supply chains or significantly disadvantage Canadian sectors. We also continue and have been for some time preparing for a review of the CUSMA agreement, with the main review scheduled for 2026 and some dairy elements of the agreement scheduled for later this year. Obviously, that timeline is fluid, and we'll be ready to engage in that process whenever it begins. We're committed to the continued implementation of CUSMA, to preserving market access, and to protecting supply-managed sectors. Well, we'll continue with our advocacy in the U.S. The reality is that what decisions get made in Washington or the capitals of other trading partners will never fully be within our control. Maybe to Tyler's point at the end of the last panel, we need to think as well about how we work together to build an economy and an agri-food value chain that's more resilient in the face of a more uncertain global environment. And on the prior panel, we heard a number of specific ideas in that regard. Another element of a more resilient sector is market diversification. We recognize that it works better for some elements of the Canadian agri-food value chain than others. But as it currently stands, we have 15 trade agreements giving us preferential market access to 51 countries around the world. And we've just, we're in the process of adding 2 more. We concluded negotiations with Indonesia in December on a trade agreement. In fact, Aaron Fowler, who was the panelist who ran away from the earlier panel, was actually our chief negotiator in that process. And we just a couple of weeks ago, in early February, concluded an agreement with Ecuador. As many of you will be aware, last year we opened an office in Manila. It's our first office abroad dedicated to promoting trade in agri-food products. And the intent is to help the industry. The intent of that office is to help the industry seize opportunities in the broader Asia-Pacific region. From that office and our other ag trade commissioners abroad and from industry, we hear consistently about how well recognized and respected the Canada brand is in markets around the world, and there's lots of opportunities for us to leverage that further. Getting back to happy hour, I'm mindful that I should pick things up here, but I did want to talk a little bit about risk management and emergency management. The agriculture sector, of course, has been on the front lines of a series of disruptions over the past several years, a number of extreme weather events, plant and animal disease episodes, supply chain disruptions, and high and volatile input costs. Coming out of COVID, it became clear to us that we needed to renew the way we planned and thought about emergency management and response, and have had an effort underway for some months toward that end. And again, thank the CFA for their partnership with us in that process. Well, emergencies come in different shapes and sizes. One thing that is unmistakable is just how, as the years go by, the frequency and severity of extreme weather events is impacting the agricultural sector. I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to attend a number of G20 and other international meetings of agriculture ministers and ministries, and I am always struck when we go around the table and people talk about what's top of mind for them. It doesn't matter whether it's a little island or a huge agricultural exporter. Absolutely everyone will identify climate impacts of agriculture as their biggest and most pressing concern. And while it's true worldwide, as a higher latitude country, Canada will feel the effects of a changing climate more quickly than many other regions of the world. We need to, as we can no longer count on the future resembling the past when it comes to weather and climate, we need to think about what that means in terms of resilience, in terms of emergency preparedness, in terms of recovery and response. And one of the tools that we have in government to help with recovery and response, of course, is our BRM suite of programs. And understanding what climate impacts mean for them and how we can make them more responsive to a changing environment. This is not a problem that's likely to go away. There's some estimates have suggested that over the next 30 years, we will see the increase in weather-related events reach $130 billion in this country, with agriculture being among the more vulnerable sectors. We're already, certainly in terms of the frequency of agri-recovery initiatives and the related expenditures, we've seen those grow. Our agri-insurance, the cost of that program have doubled over the past 10 years. And learning to make those programs not only affordable, but also more responsive to the needs of producers is a big preoccupation for us these days. We continue to work on other elements of the BRM suite. A few years ago, the compensation rate on our agri-stability was boosted. We will, over the next year, begin thinking about, it feels to me like just yesterday that we launched this SCAP, as it's known, the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, but we are thinking about what succeeds it, and we'll be initiating consultations in the coming months related to that. We're also looking at larger changes. We're doing some pilot initiatives on whole farm insurance, the idea being that you would have a single program covering both production and market risk. And we have initiatives underway with the grains and oilseeds sector in Ontario, the beef sector in Alberta, and the horticultural sectors in Ontario and Prince Edward Island. Of course, data can also play, and making better use of data. Harnessing big data can help us to plan and prepare, mitigate the impacts of climate and other emergency events. And again, this is an area where I applaud some of the leadership that CFA has shown, including in their presentation to federal, provincial, and territorial ministers in Whitehorse last summer. In terms of data in our department, we're already making use of it for mapping areas impacted by forest fires, for example. Some of you will be familiar with the drought monitoring reports that we produce, as well as making better use of data with some of our agricultural assessments. Of course, data and big data isn't just helpful for emergency management, but can also be instrumental in building a more productive, resilient, and sustainable sector. And we look forward to continuing to work with CFA in that regard. Just maybe touch quickly on biosecurity and disease management. Biosecurity, of course, is essential across the value chain, from farms to processing to marketing. It also, as a measure of prevention, is probably one of the highest return investments that we can make, as we've been reminded through the high-path avian influenza episode the past few years. One way that we've tried to broaden our partnership in animal health and disease management is through the creation of Animal Health Canada. This is a partnership between the federal government, ourselves, and the Food Inspection Agency, provincial and territorial governments, as well as agricultural and agri-food producers. The idea here, and building on models from Australia and elsewhere, is to create a single entity that brings the relevant parties together to work more cooperatively on emergency preparedness and response. We've also, through some of our programs working with CFIA, and our programs of ours, such as agri-insurance, have partnered with a number of different commodity associations to help them enhance biosecurity on their members' farms. Examples include ProAction from the dairy farmers, Pig Safe, Pig Care, Pig Trace with pork producers. Also in the pork sector, we have worked in close partnership, probably in a way that is unprecedented in terms of animal, emergency preparedness and prevention on African swine fever over the past several years. It's also an area where, we see the opportunity to build a positive and collaborative agenda with the United States and the Trump administration. Secretary Rollins, in her Senate confirmation hearing and other public remarks, has talked about animal health, animal disease as a core priority of hers. We, of course, have a history of going back many years of working with the United States and Mexico on ASF research and preparedness. And Canada hosted the 4th North American African Swine Fever Forum here in Ottawa a couple of months ago in September. Lastly, I'd note we have funding available for programming to help with ASF prevention and preparedness, biosecurity improvements, wild pig management, retrofits of abattoirs, among other initiatives. We also recognize the important mental health aspect of an emergency situation, and are working with provinces and territories to ensure policies and programs are in support to support impacted producers in the event of an ASF outbreak. I was going to talk to you a little bit about foot and mouth disease vaccine banks, but with happy hour fast approaching, perhaps I will put that aside and simply say that I sort of simultaneously feel like I've barely scratched the surface and talked for far too long already. But once again, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and gros merci pour l'invitation de vous rejoindre pour quelques minutes. Let's keep the dialogue going and look forward to any questions or comments you may have. Merci, thank you.
So thanks so much, Tom. Not much going on at AFCA. That was a plethora of a lot of stuff that's happening. Certainly, if there's any questions, please head to the mics right now. I am wondering, Tom, with respect to what's going on south of the border, what kind of advice is the department, is the minister's office giving to the PMO and the finance department on the kind of supports that agriculture potentially will need should these tariffs come into place?
Well, I would say a big part of our focus has been on a response. If Mr. Trump follows through and some of the various threats he's made, what do we do about it the next day? But beyond that, and we are, because we don't know exactly which of the various threats he is going to act upon when, it's a little bit hard to sort of, to sort of design elaborate programs. But there is, I think, we are certainly starting to think about outlines of what we could do in terms of support. There are short-term and long-term elements to it. In terms of some of the short-term elements, we'll probably draw on our experience from COVID, where not just we as a department, but the FCC and the financial crowns put emergency, supports in place for those that required them with liquidity and cash flow issues. We made adjustments to our own BRM suite of programs during COVID as part of emergency relief. Obviously, when it comes to market diversification, regulatory agility, these are areas where we have been active for a long, long time, but we're thinking about how that how we could amp up some of the ambitions that we have in those areas. And we're looking, we're looking to partners for ideas as well. So we, coming out of your meetings here this week, if you have ideas and priorities of things that we can should be thinking about, that would be welcome input.
Hi, Pierre Patel, Cropland Canada, also chair of the Canada Grains Council. Thanks, Tom, for your remarks today. We talked a lot climate and Trump, things that are kind of out of our control, but things that are in our control is our regulatory environment. And I know AFC is not a key regulatory department, but there are some things that I think the industry is hoping that this crisis will galvanize. We hear a lot about, we heard on the previous panel, things like interprovincial trade barriers, the regulatory burden, competitiveness, things that are in our control, but we're not seeing any sort of tangible outcomes. And for example, PMRA is forging ahead with transformation initiatives that we're saying will have a definite impact on innovation and investment in Canada, and yet it seems to not be resonating. So I'm just curious if there's anything sort of meaningful and tangible on the regulatory front that the government is considering in addition to all these other tariff responses.
Thanks, Pierre. And I guess the first thing I'd say is we've heard you in other fora and in media and elsewhere make that point. And I'm glad that you do. That as we think about things that we do control, and we talk with agri-food stakeholders. Obviously, a more agile regulatory system is something that is within our control, something that it's not as though this is new. We have been working, in some cases, successfully. I'm thinking, in terms of crop life on things like the novel foods, the Seeds Act, the Feed Act, some of the guidance that we published there. We have an agenda, the outlines of an agenda, and we are thinking about, how we can make that more ambitious as part of building a more resilient economy and agri-food sector. You're right that we at the department aren't a huge regulatory agency, but we do see ourselves as having a leadership role in, and not just within the federal government. I find when you talk with businesses in the food processing sector, they'll talk about FedProv things. A lot of the irritants that are impediments to investment and expansion are often municipal permitting rules and things of that nature, and thinking about how we have a really holistic kind of regulatory agility agenda that doesn't look regulatory silo by regulatory silo, but brings in, and not just at the federal level, but reaching into the provincial and municipal level to figure out how we make our investment climate more attractive, is something I can't say that we figured it out, but we are thinking about it, and certainly welcome ideas and input.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for your remarks. My name is Carol Lambar. I'm the Director of Newcomer Services at an agency called TNO, the Neighborhood Organization. And it's just the current political and economic climate. We work with migrant workers, temporary foreign workers, agricultural workers, and farmers across the province of Ontario. We're funded by the federal government to do that work. So I'm just wondering what you think around the impact certainly on those working as temporary foreign workers, as well as the local impact on farmers and rural communities.
I guess the thing that's been most striking to me about the engagement that we've done with stakeholders across the value chain on disruptions related to tariffs and Canada-US is just how absolutely some industries and businesses are more exposed than others, but everybody has some exposure to disruption. Everybody is anxious. And certainly the government has been doing outreach to labor groups, and that the anxiety that one hears from agricultural and business interests is shared by many in the labor community. I think fundamentally one of the messages that we hear from agricultural businesses is the importance of migrant labor to the vitality of the agri-food value chain in Canada. That will remain true irrespective of what happens in Canada-US relations and tariffs. But inevitably, if we do see disruptions in the value chain as a result of trade actions, that will, like I said, not just affect businesses, but the workers that work in them. And it's important we hear perspectives from people who are represent that community and understand what their vulnerabilities and interests are.
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate you coming in and updating us, and let's give Tom a hand.